The disturbing image painted by reports of growing racism in Europe against black people begs serious concerns about the social cohesion and inclusivity of the continent. Racism towards black people is growing in Europe, with Germany, Austria, and Finland showing the highest rates of discrimination and harassment. Race is a social and political reality rather than a biological or genetic fact. Racism is when prejudice and discrimination are justified based on someone's race. Those who are members of marginalized or ethnic minorities are typically the target of this discrimination. Although racism can take many different forms, systemic racism is the most prevalent and misunderstood kind. In this video, we are going to be talking about the systematic racism in Germany. We will also give instances and outline some of the most effective countermeasures. So make sure you watch this video till the end to get a full understanding. Systemic racism, also known as structural racism, refers to the deeply ingrained and often hidden ways that racial discrimination is woven into the fabric of societies and institutions. It goes beyond individual prejudice or bias. Germany faces the unavoidable existence of systematic racism despite being frequently praised for its dedication to tolerance and remembrance. It permeates all facets of German society and necessitates in-depth analysis and candid discussion. Racism in German history is closely associated with the colonial Herero and Namaqua genocides. Racism peaked during the Nazi era, which ultimately resulted in the Holocaust, a systematic state-sponsored murder program. The extermination of European Jews during World War II is known as the Holocaust. 6 million Jews, or almost two-thirds of all Jews in Europe, were methodically terminated by Nazi Germany and its allies between 1941 and 1945 while living under German occupation. The main methods used to carry out the terminations were mass shootings and poisonings in extermination camps, mostly in occupied Poland at Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, and Chumno. Parts of German society continue to tolerate lesser kinds of racism, according to assessments from the European Commission. Racism nowadays has mostly been directed towards Asian and African nations by the government and its people. Examples include rudeness and attempts by diplomats to meddle in the internal affairs of African nations. Racism has become an everyday problem in Germany. It affects not only minorities, but the society as a whole, directly or indirectly. Racial discrimination has negatively impacted individuals' mental and physical health, well-being, and self-esteem. They face limited opportunities in education, employment, housing, and social interactions. Fear, anxiety, and social exclusion are common experiences. Unconscious bias within institutions has led to discriminatory practices in areas like law enforcement, education, and healthcare. This perpetuates cycles of disadvantage and limits access to essential services for certain groups. Many Asians and blacks in Germany have at least one experience when it comes to racism. It happens in shops, trains, schools, and many other places. Black people in Germany report that people often touch their hair without their permission, ask them for drugs, and target them with sexist remarks. They also report that they are stopped by the police more often than white individuals. Finding an apartment is also more difficult. According to a recent study, racism toward black people in 13 EU countries is most prevalent in Germany and Austria. The research said 76% of German respondents claimed to have experienced discrimination in the previous 5 years due to their religion, ethnicity, or skin color. Between 2017 and 2020, more than 5,300 people contacted the counselors of the Federal Anti-Discrimination Agency because they had been discriminated on racist grounds or because of their ethnic origin. Those affected say that the police checked them because of their skin color or appearance, racial profiling. Bear in mind that in Germany, racism is not only expressed through insults and discrimination. Time and again, people are injured or terminated by racists. People of Deutschland is a book that was published during Black History Month and centers on the individual stories of those with a visible immigrant heritage in Germany. The book has stories on latent racism, microaggression, which can be unconscious bias, prejudices, and stereotypes. It ranges to the other end of the spectrum, that is psychological and physical violence. The aim of the book is not to take militant action against racist people, but to educate readers about the fact that everyone has prejudices, and that you can also recognize racist patterns and actively change them. People in Germany much too frequently encounter verbal and physical abuse in their daily lives. They frequently hear public debates by politicians over the extent to which religious or other minorities are accepted in the nation. They observe that the political left's car vandalism is associated with the violent attacks carried out by the far right. Terms used by right-wing extremists, like Islamization, have now entered common usage in the media. Human rights organization Amnesty International published a report last year saying Germany was not doing enough to combat systemic racism and does not sufficiently recognize its causes. The report presented in Berlin identified structural problems, including the methods of the police in dealing with hate crimes and in reparations for colonial crimes. Following the termination of George Floyd in the US in 2020, a serious debate on racism erupted in Germany. Tens of thousands of people also took to the streets in Berlin, Munich, and Hamburg. People in the US aren't only protesting police violence. There is a lot more to it than that. Poverty disproportionately affects Black people. They have limited access to education and poorer health care. These are structural issues that Germany also faces. Certain demographic groups are also more likely to become disadvantaged or to drop out of school in this situation. Studies also show that teachers systematically grade children worse if their names do not sound German. This isn't always because they think students with Turkish names aren't as smart. It is predicated on the automatic assumption that they are from a milieu that is less advantaged in terms of education. It's a combination of various discriminatory factors, including class and ethnic background. Particularly in Germany, there is a widespread misconception that racism can only exist if it is deliberate. But racism should not be limited to the views of those who harbor evil intent. It's also important to pay attention to institutional practices and structures that can disadvantage people unintentionally. For far too long, racism and anti-Semitism in Germany were viewed as historical events. Many thought that Germans had defeated the sins of National Socialism by accepting the existence of blacks. According to this theory, racism is a phenomenon that exclusively affects right-wing extremists. People in Germany often avoid using the term racism. However, racism has not vanished merely because the term race is no longer used. The only things that have changed are the modes of expression. These days, debates are more frequently founded on ethnic, cultural, or even religious affinity than they are on biological race ideas. Nonetheless, the goal remains to justify the privileged status of one's group and to bar those considered foreign from tangible and symbolic resources. According to examinations of political and media discourse, as well as representative opinion surveys, anti-Muslim racism is one of the most prevalent types of racism in Germany. It's like racism directed at Roma and Sinti people. It is most obviously expressed by right-wing populists, but it has long since crept into society as a whole. Numerous instances of violence against Muslims and attacks on mosques exist. However, the phenomenon has not gotten the attention it merits up until this point. Also take note that Germany has supported its ally with steadfastness ever since Israel began its most recent war on Gaza. The German government has not wavered, despite growing alarms about a possible genocide by Israeli soldiers. Germany has remained steadfast in its position that there is only one place for Germany, and that is side by side with Israel, as stated by Chancellor Olaf Scholz on October 12. The German government has not only provided wide-ranging political and diplomatic support for Israel, but has also fast-tracked arms exports to facilitate the Israeli slaughter of Palestinian civilians. The German authorities have clearly identified anti-Palestinianism as a national interest and a state policy. They wholeheartedly support Israel's existence in its current apartheid form, which requires continuous violence against the indigenous Palestinian population. This is, of course, not in contradiction to Germany's own genocidal history and continuous racism. Germany's anti-Palestinianism needs to be viewed not as a reaction to, but rather a continuation of Germany's racist crimes. Palestinians and other victims of Israeli and German violence have never been considered human enough. Bear in mind that several international bodies have addressed the issue of potential systemic racism in Germany. In 2021, the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination expressed concern about reports of racial profiling by law enforcement, racial disparities in education and employment, and discriminatory practices against refugees and migrants in Germany. The committee urged Germany to adopt stronger measures to address these issues. The European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, ECRI, has published several reports on Germany, expressing concerns about issues such as discrimination against minorities in housing, employment, and education, as well as hate crimes and Islamophobia. They have also recommended steps for Germany to take to address these issues. The Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights has commented on the need for Germany to address issues of racial profiling and discrimination against minorities. What can be done to fight the systematic racism in Germany? Equipping students with critical thinking skills empowers them to analyze information, identify biases, and question narratives that perpetuate racism. This includes media literacy to critically evaluate news and entertainment sources for potential prejudice. Integrating diverse perspectives and experiences into history curriculums, literature choices, and media representation is crucial. This challenges the dominant narrative and allows students to understand history and societal issues from multiple viewpoints. It dismantles harmful stereotypes and fosters empathy for the experiences of marginalized groups. Initiatives that empower minority communities to speak up against discrimination and assert their rights should also be supported. This could involve training on effective communication and conflict resolution. Germany should strengthen its anti-discrimination laws and enforcement mechanisms, conduct regular audits and reviews of institutions to identify and address discriminatory practices. Germany's fight against systematic racism is a long trek that calls for coordinated action, persistent effort, and an uncompromising dedication to justice. It is essential to acknowledge the intricate historical foundations as well as the current circumstances. Even though there has been a lot of improvement, the journey is far from over. Education, the cornerstone of change, must actively deconstruct biased narratives and foster critical thinking. Open dialogue, devoid of judgment, enables empathy and understanding across diverse experiences. Institutions need introspection, dismantling discriminatory practices, and embracing inclusive policies. Empowering marginalized voices and ensuring equitable representation across sectors are vital steps. Investing in long-term solutions while also making ongoing assessments and adjustments shows sincere dedication. The range of action is further expanded by acknowledging the intersectionality of different forms of discrimination. There will certainly be obstacles in the way, but with persistent cooperation from individuals, organizations, and varied communities, a more just and equitable Germany can be achieved, one in which everyone is truly welcome. Do you think that with time there will be no complaints of racism in Germany? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the New Tourist channel. Turn on notifications too, so you get notified whenever we upload videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.